Good morning, all of you. I welcome you all to Ansarkari. So, in this video, we'll be analyzing three newspapers. We'll be taking up The Hindu, the Indian Express, and the Financial Express. So, we'll be starting with The Hindu for 15th of February 2023. So we see that wholesale inflation, it eases to 4.7% in January, and yesterday only we saw that retail inflation has surpassed the 6% upper tolerance limit. And this we can say that we obviously it is clearly visible that wholesale inflation is declining, but retail inflation is increasing. Now, one possible reason behind this can be the sticky core inflation. So that is not basically, we are not seeing much fluctuations or much movements in the core inflation. So that can be one of the reasons that why retail inflation, despite a fall in the wholesale inflation, is increasing. And IT teams, they survey the BBC offices over violation of laws. So this action comes just weeks after the BBC released the film on Gujarat riots. So obviously there are political interest vested in this thing. And in this backdrop, IT teams, they are surveying the BBC offices. So BJP says that some sections they cannot digest India's growing heft on the world stage. And basically they are surveying under the charge of deliberate non-compliance with the Indian laws, including the transfer pricing rules and diversion of profits illegally. So the BBC documentary which has been banned is India, the Modi Question, which was pertaining to the 2002 Gujarat riots and a prime minister's years as obviously as a prime minister. So Modi's years as prime minister. So this was basically banned. And so, remembering the great social reformer and founder of Arya Samaj, Swami Dayanand Saraswati ji, celebrating his 200th birth anniversary. So, quoting his words, सत्य को ग्रहण करने और असत्य को छोड़ने में सर्वदा उद्यत रहना चाहिए. The US Air Force B-1B Lancer lands at Aero India 2023 in Bengaluru. So it is also known as BONE for B-1, and it carries the largest conventional payload of both guided and unguided weapons in the USAF and is considered the backbone of the America's long-range bomber force. So this lands in our Aero India 2023. So B-1 offers flexible options to senior leaders and combatant commanders. Greater integration with our allies and partners throughout the region is a positive step towards greater interoperability. And apart from that, again, India is like focusing more upon self-reliance, self-sufficiency, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and in developing our indigenous fighter jets and technologies in the defense sector. So it's a long mission to travel from the continental US to the Indian Ocean, but it was worth being part of the biggest air show in the region, which was hosted by our major defense partner, India. And US and India, they continue to deepen their defense cooperation. We have two great militaries that are even better when we work together. So, when we talk about neoliberalism, it is not about market competition, but it is about redistributing the income and wealth to favored business groups. So, basically, neoliberalism is a kind of a situation where the economies they are opened up, they are like promoting more of market competition. So here it is also about redistributing the income and wealth and reducing the inequality if it persists there. And apart from that, this article is basically focusing more upon the Adani story, which is not too useful for us from the examination perspective. So untamed inflation risks, they are hurting the domestic consumption. And just 5 days after RBI's governor, Shaktikant Das, he asserted that inflation has shown the signs of moderation and the worst is behind us. We seeing that the retail inflation is above the upper tolerance band of 6% for the month of January. And headline retail inflation, which had steadily eased over the last quarter of 2022, from a 5 month high of 7.4%, and it has again quickened by 80 basis points last month to 6.5%. That is in January 2023. It has again increased to 6.5%. So, adding to this thing, obviously, there are now some kind of expectations and deliberations regarding a possible increase in the repo rate in future. Again, that would be hurting the growth sentiment also. And this is majorly, again, we are just right now focusing upon targeting the inflation. So the surprise reversal in price trend suggests inflationary expectations in the economy, they are nowhere near anchored and will necessitate further policy action both from the RBI and also the fiscal authority. So it is not just that the monetary policy is working, both monetary policy and fiscal policy, they need to work in tandem in a synergetic manner, so that we will see that inflation expectations they get anchored, they get moderated with time. And it is very surprising that despite so much increase in the repo rate, we are still not seeing that inflation is cooling down because the inflationary expectations are still high. So that is one of the concerns that we can say. And obviously, there is some time lag, we can say, whenever a repo rate is increased and in the time period that it takes to get translated into the interest rate hikes by the commercial banks also. So given that inflation in several key services categories, including health and personal care, is running well above the RBI's upper bound of 6%, with prices continuing to harden, and the center and the states, they must mull measures, including the rationalization of GST rates to help ease the inflationary burden on the economy. So another area where we can expect some changes would be rationalization of the GST rate. So with overseas demand set to stay weak this year because of the global economic slowdown that we are seeing, so obviously this would be impacting our export sector also. And at the same time, we'll be having untamed inflation risk hurting the domestic consumption. So thereby it would be obviously impacting the overall economic growth. So at the current moment, our domestic growth is basically driving our economic growth, our domestic demand, because despite the global demand slowing down, we are like a kind of in a safer situation as of now, that we have a strong domestic demand sector. But if inflation remains high, so even that would raise certain concerns. So our digital ecosystem must be disabled friendly also. So the estimation in census 2011 that 2% of India's population is disabled, that is a gross underestimation of this. And according to the World Health Organization, about 16% of the global population is disabled. And if that figure is extrapolated to the Indian context, it would mean at least 192 million people are disabled in India. So while technology, it has enormous potential to level the playing field for the disabled people, it can at the same time reinforce the barriers that the disabled otherwise face if it is not designed with their needs in mind. So obviously these things must be considered whenever there is any initiative being taken in the digital space. And India, it reported like it had around 750 million internet or smartphone users in 2020. So applying the 16% figure here, this works out to be roughly 12 crore internet smartphone users with disabilities. So regarding apps and the evaluation, so there is no denying the fact that our lives are increasingly being led by digital things, digital technology, especially in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we use apps to order groceries, foods, medicine, like everything is happening digitally. We know that there is long way to go when it comes to making apps which are disabled friendly. So that should be considered. And next step should be to work with these service providers and help them design the practices and the processes that will not only improve the app accessibility, but also educating their stakeholders about the accessibility and people with disabilities. So this will hopefully improve the design and development practices so that the apps are accessible right from the inception and we do not have to remediate for accessibility. So this should be the second step. And when we talk about artificial intelligence and the algorithms, so as with other sectors, like the authors they say that we are excited by the role technology can play in our efforts. So we currently use technology to automate a large number of accessibility tests and combine. So basically they're talking about the methodology, which is not so important. So the core to the project of securing a more disabled-friendly digital ecosystem must be the conviction that everything digital must be accessible to every single person. And this starts with incorporating the principles of accessibility and inclusive design into every digital offering right from the inception. And India needs to be truly accessible for all the people with disabilities, organizations, companies, civil society, the government, and the codes. They must make this thing happen. So again, when we talk about Ladakh, so before also we've been like talking about this issue that why the people of Ladakh are protesting, what are their demands, and why are they basically asking for autonomy. So basically the people, their major demand is that Ladakh must be included under the sixth schedule. And obviously, they have Ladakh has a fragile ecosystem. There is a threat from China also. So, why the people of Ladakh dissatisfied with the region's status as a union territory? So, when the Article 370 was scrapped, Ladakh was made a separate union territory, and Jammu and Kashmir was made a separate union territory. But Ladakh was made a union territory without a legislature. So, after being made a union territory, all the Ladakhis, they had been demanding UT status for many years and they got it in 2019. So basically, obviously, people celebrated this moment that they have been kind of given some independence and autonomy. And obviously, when it does not have any legislative body, so it is directly being ruled from the center, that is from New Delhi, by the bureaucracy. And right now, two hill development councils are functioning there, which is in the Leh region and the Kargil region. And sixth schedule status was also promised to the region. So here basically we're discussing with the BJP government had announced that Ladakh would get special constitutional status, providing it autonomy in 2019. And some parts of that promise are still they are yet to be fulfilled. And one of them is the sixth schedule demand. So it is important to understand the sensitivity of Ladakh. The region's cold desert ecosystems, they harbor rare mammals like wild yak and the snow leopard and diverse flora. So cultures and livelihoods, they have evolved to be sensitive to the fragility of the ecosystems that cannot bear heavy human activity. So administrators sitting in or appointed from Delhi, they hardly comprehend what can and cannot work in such a landscape. So basically the bureaucracy that is functioning and that is administering and handling the entire Ladakh region, they're kind of hostile and deterrent toward the Ladakhi people. And they're not working in a coordinated manner and not taking into considerations the demands of the Ladakhi people so that there is a sustainable development of the region. People get more job, there is more development. So things are not happening likewise. And apart from that, So people, they are basically demanding that they should be given the sixth schedule status. And apart from that, obviously we know about Sonam Wangchuk sir also, who's taking unique initiatives in the Ladakhi in safeguarding the Ladakh's environment, be it like through his engineering ideas. He's also like taking into account in this, like he's also like working in a, we can say, collaborative manner with the students also. And he has like brought amazing reforms when we talk about the education sector there. So his idea is basically that the education sector must be much more creativity based and activity based, instead of just running behind marks and your report cards. So that's how he has played a very important role, and he's, we can say, the main representative of the people when we talk about the Ladakh region. So people are basically demanding all these things, and they are protesting. They're on streets protesting for their demands and their autonomy and more development of the region. They also fear that if more private investment comes in, more private companies come in, so their environment would be destroyed and they would not be getting jobs. So they're also asking for reservation of the local people in the jobs. They're asking for the Lok Sabha seats, and apart from that, the sixth schedule status. So mainly they have all these demands there. So recently we discovered lithium reserves in Jammu and Kashmir, and you can like have a look. How do they look in this picture? And they're showing the lithium stones which have been discovered in the Risi district of Jammu and Kashmir. So what is the significance of the new 5.9 million tons inferred resources of the lithium that we have discovered? What are the environmental concerns around its extraction procedure? And thirdly, what are the geostrategic implications considering the geopolitical sensitivity of this area? So basically, why is this thing significant for us is that lithium ion batteries are used in wind turbines, in the solar panels, in the electric vehicles, all of which are crucial in a green economy. So this is the first reason why lithium discovery is very important for us. And apart from that, World Bank studies suggest that the demand for the critical metals, such as lithium and cobalt, is expected to rise by nearly 500% by 2050. So this discovery is extremely important for India, and the global electric vehicle market is projected to reach around $823 billion by 2030. So obviously this sector is going to increase in future. So lithium is a very important raw material for this. And right now, India currently imports all of its lithium from Australia and Argentina, and 70% of its lithium ion cell requirements from China and Hong Kong. So the lithium reserves in Jammu and Kashmir, it could boost the domestic battery manufacturing industry and obviously reduce our import dependence, specifically on China and other economies. So that is going to help us at the BOP front also. Apart from that, it would be generating more jobs, and obviously we'll be developing our, like, the lithium, the battery manufacturing sector domestically. So the Jammu and Kashmir reserves will also help advance the Indian government's ambitious plan of 30% electric vehicles penetration in the private cars and 70% for the commercial vehicles, 80% for the two-wheelers and three-wheelers by 2030 for the automobile industry. And this will strengthen India's national mission on transformative mobility and battery storage as well. So now we'll be looking into what are the geostrategic concerns related to this. So critical mineral dependencies constitute a major geostrategic concern in the transition to the net zero carbon energy systems, because the demand is only going to increase in future. And in the present scenario, as countries, they seek to avoid dependencies and vulnerabilities related to the critical minerals. So the later they are likely to be at least as important as oil and gas in the near future. So it is like lithium is going to be and other raw materials which are important for a green energy sector. They are going to be as important as oil and gas in the future. And obviously, we are dependent upon another economy and on another country for importing those raw materials. So obviously, we are at certain kind of risk at every point of time because the demand is going to like increase in future. So every country would like firstly wish to develop their own domestic sector, and then only having that second option of exporting them to the other countries and earning from that. So given this backdrop, it is very important that we discovered lithium in Jammu and Kashmir, and Jammu and Kashmir region with like it in itself is a very important region for India. And China currently controls 77% of the global lithium ion battery manufacturing capacity. It is home to 6 of the world's 10 manufacturing companies. So China is such a big producer, and obviously will definitely we are talking about that we need to reduce our dependence upon China, because over a period of like the entire year of 2022, we saw that when we were talking about we need to reduce our dependence on China, we saw that we rather increased our dependence upon China when it comes to the imports that we are having from China. And on the other hand, our exports to China declined. So that is a concern for us. And apart from that, the growing geopolitical rivalry with China makes India's security considerations more immediate as well, especially also in light of the long standing and the recently escalating territorial and the border disputes with China. So, to reduce our dependence on China, the Indian government and the industry they are pushing for a rare earths mission also. So, you can find out about what are rare earth minerals. So that is going to be to explore the country's critical mineral reserves, which account for 6% of the world's rare earths reserves prior to discovery of lithium in Jammu and Kashmir. So you can also find out that where in India do we have the reserves of rare earth metals and why are they called rare? And also, the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir has been the site of historical cross border tensions between India and Pakistan and domestic insurgency and terrorism. So, if the local population isn't meaningfully engaged in the impending lithium extraction project, the resulting tension could introduce new frontiers of socio environmental conflict also. So, what are going to be the environmental effects of lithium extraction? We know that applications of lithium in renewable energy infrastructure often obscures its significant environmental consequences. So, extracting lithium from the hard rock mines, similar to what has already been proposed in Jammu and Kashmir, it entails open pit mining followed by the roasting the ore using the fossil fuel. So the industry estimates suggest that this process consumes about 170 cubic meters of water and releases 15 tons of carbon dioxide for every ton of lithium extracted. So, in the densely populated context of India, the socio-environmental effects of mining are likely to be far worse than they have been in Australia and likely comparable to lithium extraction in South America. So, this is going to be a concern going forward when we try to extract lithium from the recently discovered reserves. So, what can we learn from South America when it comes to the lithium extraction? So, as India embarks on this journey, it could learn from the experiences of South American countries, especially the Lithium Triangle. So, Lithium Triangle is formed by three countries, which includes Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina, which contain roughly half of the world's known lithium. And in Bolivia and Chile, lithium extraction has been either in the hands of the state, that is, in the hands of the public sector, or it requires mining companies to enter into a contract with the state owned companies. So either it is completely in the hands of the public sector or they are like working in a public private partnership. And like we can also learn in terms of the technology that they're using, the process and the method, how they're extracting and then they're processing, and ensuring that environment is also not impacted much during this entire process. So when we talk about the safeguards that India has regarding the mining sector, so the state government officials in Jammu and Kashmir, they have said that plans for lithium exploration will involve the local communities. So the participation of local communities is important given the location of these reserves that is there in Jammu and Kashmir. So who will also be prioritized for jobs in the exploration sector and mine development. So obviously it would be leading to creation of more jobs in the sector, and that would like that's how the local communities would be participating. Yet employment in the mining may not fully offset the consequences on the local agriculture, animal husbandry, and the tourism. So in recognition of the local effects of the mining in 2015, Lok Sabha amended the Mines and the Minerals Development Regulation Act of 1957 to establish the District Mineral Foundation. So here the District Mineral Foundation becomes important. So it is a non-profit statutory trust for every Indian district affected by the mining related operations that should work for the interest and benefits of the persons and the areas affected by mining related operations. So this statement is extremely important. You need to read it once again to clearly understand what it is trying to say. That firstly, that the district mineral foundation is not present in each and every district in the country. It is only there where basically the district is affected by the mining related operations, and it works bestly in like in the best interest of the people and the areas which are affected by the mining related operations. So in practice, they have like become sites of centralized bureaucratic control without meaningful public participation or accountability. So this is one of the drawbacks of it. And so the general failure, it adds to the concerns expressed by the environmentalists and the concerned citizens about the recent history of weakening the environmental impact assessment framework also. So, to these ends, reducing the luxury consumption and promoting the public transport should also be an important part of the agenda of a just energy transition when we talk about it. So, like we need to promote more of public transportation at the same time also. So the Army chief says that in terms of the overall combat aviation profile, the force is looking at having around 90 to 95 light combat helicopters, which is Prachand, and that has been indigenously developed by India. So it is set to receive indigenous light utility helicopters to replace over 200 aging Cheetah and Chetaks, which are currently in service. So the indigenous light combat helicopter, it is more versatile in terms of its maneuverability and lightweight, and so is most suited for the mountains also. So you should be knowing that 10th schedule is in regard to the anti-defection law, and rest everything is political here. So Modi and Biden, they hail a deal between Air India and Boeing. So, this is a shining example of mutually beneficial cooperation that will help create more employment opportunities in both the countries. So, the two leaders expressed satisfaction at the deepening of the India US comprehensive global strategic partnership, which has resulted in robust growth in all the domains. So India has provided medical assistance worth rupees 7 crores to the Turkey hit Syria and to the earthquake hit Turkey and Syria. And this has been provided by India. So we are like providing all possible relief to the two countries. So Assam starts the eviction drive on the forest land. So here, the law that becomes important is the Forest Rights Act of 2006. And so the opposition there is claiming that the eviction drive basically claiming that many of the families they were entitled to have the land rights as per this act. And next important fact is that there is Burachpori Wildlife Sanctuary, which is located in Assam. So that is there. So basically, the deputy commissioner said that thousands of people have illegally occupied the forest for decades, and the administration has decided to clear it during the ongoing exercise. So Arunachal brews love for the local teas on the Valentine's Day. So the Arunachal Pradesh Agriculture Marketing Board it slaughtered the first Arunachal Tea Festival on the day associated globally with the commercial celebration of romance to brew love for the locally produced teas. And like they've not named the tea varieties over here. So this event would be held on the banks of Siang River in Pasighat. So it is there in Arunachal Pradesh. So we were talking about yesterday about the president's color, which has been awarded to the Haryana police. This has been like presented by the Union Home Minister. So the Union Home Minister said that after the revocation of the special provisions to Jammu and Kashmir under Article 370, there has been a drastic reduction in the terror incidents, and the tourism has also got a fillip there. So he was speaking at the state level function at the Haryana Police Academy in Karnal, where he presented the president's color to the state police in recognition of its exceptional service. So it is basically president's color is a special flag which is given to a military, a paramilitary, or police unit as a mark of recognition for its services to the nation. Now, recently, US it shot down the Chinese spy balloon. So again, Taiwan is now saying that it will also shoot the spy balloons if anyone is spotted in its airspace. And Beijing tells US to investigate those balloons. So Beijing doubled down on the allegations that the US has sent over 10 balloons since last year to China. Now we are seeing that Ukraine's allies they scramble to supply the arms as Russia goes on a broader offensive. So tensions are rising, the war is escalating every single day. We are seeing something or the other happening. Adani says faces no refinancing risk or any liquidity issues. So this is basically to reassure the investors and not dwindle their confidence into the Adani group of companies. We'll take up the next newspaper, that is Financial Express. So there is no full-fledged probe into Adani for now, and issue being monitored by both the finance and the corporate ministries. Government to wait for SEBI report on the route in the Adani stocks and center abreast of the matter, whether it's revenue or forex flows or the company law concerns. So right now we are just waiting for the SEBI's report over this entire thing. So again, through this graph, you can understand how the wholesale index, wholesale price index is performing and how the consumer price index is performing. So wholesale inflation it is although declining, but we are not seeing CPI to be declining. And you can see that CPI, it is above the upper tolerance limit of 6%. So resolving the V3 portal problems, Nirmala Sitharaman directs the ministry. So many users of MCA 21 portal, they have reported facing the technical issues at the time of filing since the launch of the new forms under version 3. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs would be looking into this. So 21 more airports would be linked to the Krishi Udan scheme, and this aims to facilitate faster movement of the agricultural produce from the hills. And under the scheme, lemon and grapes from the northeast, they are being sent to Germany and the United Kingdom. So basically, this is one of the steps taken by government to boost the farmers' income, reduce basically their transportation cost in a way, and obviously promote more agricultural exports. So we estimate that the wheat output, they are set to touch a new record of 112 million tons. And this is going to be for 2022-23 crop year for July to June. So inflation in the wheat prices, it rose by 25% on year in January, pushing up the retail food inflation. So this can be also one of the reasons why the retail inflation is on an upward bracket. So three possibilities stand out when we talk about inflation. So first is the orderly disinflation. So this can be one of the possibilities that in future we might see that inflation would it would basically come down in an orderly fashion. And the second could be that it might remain sticky as we are seeing right now in the context of the core inflation. And thirdly, there can be a U inflation curve or a performance of the inflation in a U fashion that right now we're talking about that it is moderating, and in future there is a possibility that it might again shoot up. So with prices back up later this and into 2024, so these are the three possibilities how inflation it can perform, and it is just going to add up the complexity because obviously we cannot have an 100% estimate or a 100% forecast regarding the inflation performance in future. So whatever happens, the worst thing we can do is fall back into complacency. And Powell, after championing transitory inflation, is now warning against it. Simplistic economic narratives that entice those looking for shortcuts often mislead much more than enlighten. So we are seeing that the economy is slowing down and RBI must pause on tightening since inflation should trend lower from now on. So these are just expectations that it should trend lower from now on, but what if it does not? Because repo rate has been like aggressively hiked by the RBI, and now we are seeing that the economy is also slowing down. So what next under this backdrop? Because now there are twin challenges before RBI: slowdown in growth and increased inflation. So majorly when we talk about global concerns, it is firstly, the Russia-Ukraine war, which is basically it can drive up the prices of major commodities like oil and gas and the metals. So that can be one of the factors driving up inflation for India. Apart from that, food inflation, cereal inflation is another concern for the inflation. So, since much of the inflation shock appears to be behind us, especially with the services activity likely to plateau soon, RBI should be cautious about any further tightening and in the absence of any major disruption. Therefore, there is good reason for the central bank to pause even if it holds on its withdrawal of accommodation stance. So, it must take into account the fact that prices of the food they are moderating while the core inflation could remain sticky as firms they pass on the higher cost of raw materials. Most of the increase in is probably behind us. So importantly, real rates they have turned positive. So one reason that why the retail inflation might be towards the upper end, it can be that the firms might transfer that cost of increased prices of the raw materials towards onto the consumers. So that can be also one of the reasons why it might remain a little higher, but RBI should not be like going ahead aggressively on rate hikes. So we see that center's tax devolution to the states it is falling, and we can understand this trend through this graph that it was at 40.3% of the divisible pool in financial year 2022. Then the revised estimates say that it is going to be 37% and 36.5% subsequently. So the share is declining. So obviously that this can be one of the factors that state's economy might also be slowing down because of this, and central resource transfer below the pre-COVID levels. So that is below the pre-COVID levels. And again, we are just seeing and trying to understand that the center's tax devolution to the states is falling. And center's spending is higher than the state's transfers. So again, center is like it is focusing upon capital expenditure, so it is spending more than the states are doing. So even inflation in US it stays elevated, and in January the consumer price index it increased by 0.5%. So right now like concerns they have not subsided as of now. So rate hike pressure still remains, and consumer prices they rose briskly at the start of the year, which is a sign of persistent inflationary pressures. This could push the Fed to raise the interest rates even higher than the earlier expected. And core CPI advanced by 0.4% last month, and it was up to 5.6% from a year earlier. So even again, we are hearing about the concerns related to inflation in the US economy also. So that is like it will be impacting our capital market also, because then it would drive the foreign investors to exit the Indian capital market at a higher rate. And we saw one of the highest amount of exits in the month of January also. So that adds up to the pressure on the Indian rupee. So Indian rupee starts depreciating as there is more and more capital outflows from the Indian economy, which leads to imports becoming much more expensive and adding up to the We can say the deficit in the BOP account or in balance of trade account. So RBI issues additional directions to make the digital lending much more safe and secure. So the guidelines on digital lending, delineating the role of financial technology and the banks or the NBFC. So the central bank has also laid down procedure for recovery of loans in case there is any default, and other necessary disclosures needed to be made to the borrower. So can the NPA recovery be made in cash? So non-performing assets. So banks and NBFCs, they can deploy physical interface to recover the loans in cash where absolutely like it is necessary. And in order to afford the operational flexibility to the lender, such transactions are exempted from the requirement of direct repayment of loan in the lender's bank account. So digital lenders will inform the borrowers upfront about the recovery agents, and EMI programs on credit card will not be covered under the digital lending guidelines. Apart from that, banks and BFCs, they can deploy the physical interface to recover the loans in cash where it is necessary. So basically the process is like being made much more safe and secure so that we have reduced NPAs in future also. And NPAs are on a declining trend, so that should also be one thing which you should be knowing. Now we'll take up the Indian Express. So we'll not be obviously discussing the important news articles that we've already discussed in the Hindu. So I think we should directly go into the editorial page. So the WMO, that is the World Meteorological Organization, as per its report, Mumbai, Dhaka, London, New York, they are in line of threat from rising sea level. So we have, in case of India, we just have Mumbai. So apart from that, London, New York, Dhaka, they are very important places. So they are facing the threat of a rising sea level. So rising sea level over the years, when we try to understand that, so it has been like increasing by 0.2 meters. So the average rate of rise annually is about 4.5 millimeters, and you can see how sharply it has been increasing every single year. And why it has been increasing? Because of 50% thermal expansion of water, 22% ice loss from the glaciers, 20% because of loss of ice sheets, 8% because of changes in the land water storage system. So this is between the period 1971 and 2018. So 50% is majorly because of thermal expansion of the water. So basically it is when water gets much more warmer, it causes the volume of water to increase. And why water is like becoming much more warmer, that is very clear to all of us, that it is because of increase in the global temperatures, and for that we have the Paris Agreement also. And when we talk about how, so there is a risk of much higher sea level rise due to potential intrusion of seawater under the Antarctic glaciers. As NASA it demonstrated in its recent published scientific studies that human influence was very likely the main driver of these increases since at least 1971. And now, when we talk about the situation now, so WMO it finds it is virtually certain that global mean sea level will continue to rise over the 21st century. Secondly, over the next 2000 years, the global mean sea level will rise by about 2 to 3 meters if warming is limited to 1.5%, and which is like highly unlikely. We are expecting that it would be crossing 1.5 degrees Celsius also. So it will continue to rise over subsequent millennia and will rise 2 to 6 meters if limited to 2 degrees Celsius. So even the estimate for that is also given, and rise 19 to 22 meters with 5% of global warming. So situation is highly uncertain as of now, and it is very challenging for us that how are we going to deal with any situation like this in future. So whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech. So when we start witnessing any like instances, increased instances of violation of freedom of speech, it is basically driving us towards a situation where we'll be seeing or we'll be having our liberties compromised. So, talking about Japan and the global south. So, under the Prime Minister of Japan, Tokyo has been pushing the G7 to engage the developing nations while casting aside preconceptions and recognizing their historical and cultural backgrounds. So basically, Kishida is reflecting on the fact that many developing nations they are not willing to join the Western condemnation of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, despite the fact that global South deeply values the ideas of territorial sovereignty and non-intervention in the internal affairs of the states. So he's acutely conscious of the fact that the West has neglected the political engagement of the global South in recent decades. And in the Cold War, the West competed fiercely with Moscow for strategic influence across the global South. So, India, which has long backed Japan's leadership role in Asia, it has every reason to welcome Kishida's new interest in the global south. And Japan's initiatives on the Indo Pacific and the Quad, they have broken the misperception of Asia as being merely Sino-centric. So, India Japan partnership on the global south might hopefully help overcome the traditional divides between East and West, as well as North and South also. So, when we talk about finance related to green transition, so a global climate finance agency under G20 that could drive the climate action. So, the three particularly significant recommendations which can provide immediate runs on the board for India's G20 presidency are the G20 is like it should focus on providing financial support for those most in need as a cornerstone of the climate action and energy transition in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Protocol, and that has also been reinforced and enshrined in the Paris Agreement and the successive COPs. So this is a natural role for the G20 to play given the involvement of leading economies in it. And public financing alone will not be enough for dealing with the current energy challenges that we have. So private finance is needed along with the public finance. That means continued work is needed to align the global financial flows with the Paris Agreement goals. And possible game changer could be the creation of a global climate finance agency to better integrate and drive this global agenda, including at very practical levels. And definitely this would be like here we are focusing more upon providing climate finance from the private sector. But again, it is important that developed world plays a major role here in terms of providing climate finance. And finally, G20 can harness the significant power of the public procurement system to accelerate the energy transitions. And there is abundant evidence that, if done well, this can be a major driver of change, for instance, by ensuring funding and adaptation at a larger scale. So, the missing deputy speaker will be discussing about the post and what the constitution has to say on this. So Supreme Court on Monday it issued notices to the center in the 5 states, which included Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and Jharkhand, over the failure to elect a deputy speaker. So even at like in the parliament, we don't have a deputy speaker as of now. So Chief Justice of India, a bench led by him, it has a sought response on a PIL that contends that not electing a deputy speaker to the 17th, that is the present Lok Sabha, which was constituted recently, basically in 2019, it is against the letter and spirit of the Constitution. So after a petition was filed regarding this, the Supreme Court has directed it has issued notices to the center and 5 states. So this post has been lying vacant in 5 state assemblies as well, which were constituted between 4 years and almost 1 year ago. Despite like such a long time, they do not have a deputy speaker as of now. So when we look into the intricacies and the constitution, regarding deputy speaker, so Article 93, it says that House of the People shall, as soon as may be, choose 2 members to be speaker and the deputy speaker, and so often as the office of speaker or deputy speaker becomes vacant, the House shall choose another one. So there is no fixed time limit that has been mentioned in the Constitution that within this time period, a speaker and deputy speaker must be elected, but it is saying as soon as may be. You need to choose 2 members to be speaker and deputy speaker. And then we have Article 178, which contains the corresponding position for speaker and deputy speaker of the Legislative Assembly of a state. So Article 93 is there for the Parliament, and Article 178 is in the context of the state assemblies and the deputy speaker and the speaker. So is it really mandatory to have a deputy speaker? So the constitutional experts they point out that both Article 93 and 178 they use the word shall, indicating that the election of speaker and deputy speaker is mandatory under the constitution. So it is mandatory to have both speaker and deputy speaker as per the Indian constitution. So, how soon must the deputy speaker be elected? So, as I just explained, that it is not mentioning any fixed time period, but it is mentioning as soon as may be possible. And but they do not lay down a specific time frame. And when we try to look and understand at the general practice that has been followed since such a long time in both Lok Sabha and the state assemblies, they and like it has been to elect the speaker during most shortly in the first session of the new house itself, usually on the third day after the oath taking and affirmations over the first 2 days, we get a speaker elected. And when we talk about the elections of the deputy speaker, usually takes place in the second session and is generally not delayed further in the absence of a genuine and unavoidable constraints. So Rule 8 of the Rules of Procedure and the Conduct of Business in Lok Sabha it says that election of the deputy speaker shall be held on such a date as the speaker may fix the date for. So the speaker has this power to fix a date for the elections of deputy speaker in the parliament in the Lok Sabha. So the deputy speaker is elected once a motion proposing his name is carried in the House. And once elected, the deputy speaker usually continues in office for the entire duration of the House. And under Article 94, the speaker or the deputy speaker shall vacate his office if he ceases to be a member of the House. So this is important in the context of prelims. And they may also resign to each other or may be removed from office by a resolution of the House of the People passed by a majority of all the then members of the House. So basically, they are removed using an effective majority. So talking about their powers, so do the powers of speaker extend to the deputy speaker as well or not? So here we have Article 95 clause 1, which says while the office of speaker is vacant, the duties of the office shall be performed by the deputy speaker. So under this situation, deputy speaker gets all the power that a speaker gets. And in general, the deputy speaker has the same powers as the speaker when presiding over a sitting of the house also. So all references to the speaker in the rules are deemed to be references to the deputy speaker when he presides. So can the courts intervene in cases of delay in electing the deputy speaker or not? So in 2021, a petition was filed before the Delhi High Court, which argued that delay in election of deputy speaker violated Article 93. However, there is no precedent of a court for forcing the legislature to elect the deputy speaker. So we don't have any precedent on this issue before, and courts usually they don't intervene in the procedural conduct of the parliament. And Article 122, Clause 1 says that the validity of any proceedings in the Parliament shall not be called in question on the ground of any alleged irregularity of the procedure. And however, experts they said that the courts they do have the jurisdiction to at least inquire into why there has been no election to this post of the deputy speaker, since the constitution does envisage an election as soon as maybe. So basically court can intervene into into the reasons of why not being elected, why this post is lying vacant for such a long time period, because the constitution speaks about this thing. Talking about geo-heritage sites and geo-relics, so the center has brought in a draft bill for the conservation, preservation, and maintenance of such sites. So here, what actually are geo-heritage sites? So the bill, it gives us a proper definition of what can be a geo-heritage site. So basically, these are sites which are containing geo-relics and phenomena, stratigraphic type sections, geological structures and geomorphic landforms, including caves, including the natural rock sculptures of national and international interest, and includes such portion of land adjoining the site that may be required for their conservation or access, we can say as a buffer zone also. So a geo-relic is defined as any relic or material of a geological significance or interest like sediments, rocks, minerals, meteorite, or fossils. So there are 32 geo-heritage sites which are spread across 13 states in India, which some examples have been given, which includes volcanogenic buried barrels of Mangampitta in Andhra Pradesh. We have Akar Fossil Wood Park in Rajasthan. We have the Lunar Lake in Maharashtra. So these are the geo-heritage sites which are there in India. So we have 32 as of now. So it is the Geological Survey of India which declares a geo-heritage site as National Geological Monuments for the protection and the maintenance. And then the Geological Survey of India or the respective state governments, they have to take certain actions and measures to protect such sites. So this draft bill says that the central government will be authorized to declare a geo-heritage site as having national importance. So the power is there with the central government to declare any such site, and the required land will then be acquired. So its current owner would be compensated, and penalties imposed for destruction or defacement of such sites would also be there. Then talking about the high altitude balloons. So the US and China, they have traded charges of spying on each other using these spy balloons. So for what purposes are these balloons usually sent into the air, and what makes them useful for surveillance, and how common is such use? So you can see a balloon in Antarctica. It is readied in 2013 for its flight around the South Pole, carrying the CREAM instrument high in the atmosphere to measure the cosmic rays. So high altitude balloons, they have in frequent use for several decades now, though the first uses, they go back at least 200 years. So they are used mainly for the scientific purposes, but increasingly for the tourism and joyrides, surveillance and disaster relief, and for the rescue operations. So that is there, and mostly most of these are built of thin sheets of polyethylene, like the common plastic bags, and they're filled mostly with the helium gas. So they are there for the scientific missions, and NASA has a full-fledged balloon program that does 4 or 5 launches every single year, and several universities and research institutions also use the balloons for the research work. And balloon-based experiments, they have resulted in at least 2 Nobel Prizes for physics in 1936 and in 2006. And talking about such activities in India, so the scientific balloons, they have been used in India for more than 70 years for now. And the first one having been sent in 1948 by Homi Bhabha for the cosmic ray research. And like we have been having such missions in India also. So it is regularly used by the space institutions under ISRO and weather research institutions like the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, which is there in Pune. So institutions like the Bangalore-based Indian Institute of Astrophysics and Hyderabad's Osmania University, as well as some private educational institutions, they also have the balloon program. So even private educational institutions are involved in such programs. So drought looming there in Kenya, and the people there, they urge for help, and you need to like find out about its geography, its surrounding countries, its neighboring countries, and so as of now they're just dependent upon rains, and it has been experiencing some of the worst drought conditions in the decades. Again, it is because of like meteorologists, they say that human caused climate change has been exacerbating the extreme conditions over there. So that is there. So we have talked about inflation a lot. So the commercial vehicle industry volumes to see a growth of around 7 to 10%, and it would be majorly driven by the government infrastructure spending, replacement demand, and e-commerce expansion to boost the volume of this sector. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining in, Sarkari. I hope you've understood all the key details that we discussed today. We'll be getting the PDF link in the description box, and do not forget to subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and share this video as much as possible. Thank you so much for joining us.